Good morning, everyone. Welcome today. Thank you for joining us for the first ALER Spotlight. We are very happy to have you all here. We have been a great interest for this webinar and a lot of registrations. I hope we will be having a lot of participation as well. We have a great list of speakers today, but you are welcome in the end to join the discussion and to ask your questions. So ALER Spotlight is a new type of event that we have launched this year. And it's a space to highlight the activity, the portfolio, the positioning, or anything that a specific company would like to highlight in the renewable energy sector, ideally in the Portuguese-speaking countries. So it's an event organized exclusively for each company. And the idea is to foster partnerships, investment opportunities, and new projects in these countries. Greenlight is a member of ALER for several years now. They've been participating. They have activity in several of the Portuguese-speaking countries, but they will present themselves later on. But they have been participating in several of the events we've been organizing, and they have chosen now to have a spotlight for themselves, where their activity and their interest will be highlighted. But they have chosen a topic which is very much in line with the work that ALER has been doing. As you might have known, or for those of you who don't know, ALER is a partner of the EU. We are partners of the GET.invest program, which will be presented later on by one of the speakers. And so we've been working very closely with the EU delegations. We've been having projects with the EU delegations, mostly in Mozambique, but also in Angola lately in the past years, but also, of course, we work with the EU delegation in the other countries. And so the topic of today is Energizing Africa, how EU financing is changing the renewable energy landscape. And the idea is to highlight the current approach and the implementation of EU financing to accelerate energy transition in Africa by mitigating the risks and encouraging private sector investment. So one of the challenges that we are that all of us have been facing, and one of the challenges we want to outcome is to ensure we have private sector investment and private sector-led projects in these countries, for example, in the form of IPPs and other type of concessions. So today, as speakers, we have Alina Orrico from the European Development Finance Institutions, EDFI, João Fonseca Santos from the European Investment Bank, Sebastian von Wolf from GET.invest Finance Catalyst, Coran Tambier from the Electrification Finance Initiative, mostly known as Electrify, and then we'll be having Edgar Arieira and Miguel Mendes from GreenVenture. And to introduce you to the topic and highlight the objectives of this webinar, I would like to welcome Miguel Mendes from GreenVenture. Good morning, Miguel.
Hi, Isabel. Good morning, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for the introduction, and as well allow me to congratulate ALER for organizing today's webinar. I think on behalf of GreenVenture, we're glad to contribute to such an important discussion on the role of renewable energy finance in Africa. So it's good to see that we have a large number of attendees in the audience, and we hope that this discussion is going to be insightful and create synergies between financiers, developers, and other institutions. So going to your question, Isabella, in terms of addressing the importance of renewable energy finance in Africa, I would like to focus on three main areas for this first overview of the topic. So first, I'll start by putting the topic into context by presenting some figures that show the urgency of energy finance in Africa before expressing the reality that developers like us, GreenVenture, face when trying to finance projects in the continent. Secondly, I'll share a list of country and project level criteria that we as developers consider essential for renewable energy projects to see the light in Africa. This is something as a reference point that we use internally as well. And finally, I'll mention how GreenVenture is contributing to the Global Gateway initiative that will be presented afterwards by the other speakers. So now into the figures, and something that most of you know, access to electricity remains a big challenge in Africa. Over half of the continent's population lacks access to affordable and reliable electricity. And this is huge, and this is a need that EU institutions need to address, as well as the private sector. In terms of investments, just to give you an idea, Africa is the destination of just 3% of global energy investments, despite accounting for nearly 20% of the world's populations. And these are figures from the International Energy Agency that by 2030, it is estimated that the energy investment needs to double to over 200 billion per year in order for African countries to achieve their energy-related goals. So this we can see that EU financing can have a key role to play in this setting. And regarding installed capacity, Africa's generation capacity is about 240 gigawatts, which if we compare to the European scenario, it's almost the same volume as in Germany today. So we can compare, see how much installed capacity is in the whole of Africa compared with just one country in Europe. So from this, it is clear that we can see there is a huge opportunity in the adoption of renewables in Africa from a financing perspective. On the resource side, Africa is as well the richest region in the world in terms of solar radiation, though, as we can see today, it hasn't materialized its potential. And I think this webinar is going to be a very good setting for us to discuss these issues and as well go into the aspects of finance, where the continent needs to attract the necessary investments. And with that comes necessarily the cost of capital, which is a key determinant of the financial viability of a project. So what is the reality that developers like us embrace normally? Is that the cost of capital for, let's say, a typical utility scale project can be 2 or 3 times higher in Africa than in advanced economies. And I'll repeat this, 2 or 3 times higher in Africa compared to European countries or the US. So you can see that the challenges are enormous for us to get to bankable projects. And as a result, there is a lack of bankable projects in Africa and a concentration of capital in few key countries in the continent, such as South Africa, Morocco, and Egypt. And this reality has to change. We need to have more investments in other countries, in smaller African countries. So moving to the second point of my agenda, what are the conditions that we see as vital for developers to feel comfortable when investing in Africa? And this I'll divide into 2 areas. First, in terms of the country level, where a stable economic and legal context is essential, ensuring economic stability, enforceable contracts, and a fair arbitration is something that we first look when analyzing countries. As well, we go to and analyze afterwards the energy policy framework that exists in a country to understand if there's a clear legal framework for private sector involvement. Thirdly, the regulatory transparency, which is as well an essential factor for us to understand what are the licensing and tariff structures that exist in a country. And finally, a coherent sector planning is also something we take a look when analyzing country. Afterwards, when we move to the project level, and I think very relevant for dealing with financial institutions as well, and this we get more into the micro level, where we tend to favor strong equity partners that we can work with that are experienced and risk tolerant when investing in Africa. We as well look into favorable debt arrangements, competitive financing that mitigates, for instance, foreign exchange risk, which is a reality in Africa, where many countries have local currencies that are highly exposed to volatility and in which we need to mitigate. Another aspect that is essential at a project level is the creditworthiness of the off-taker, the entity that will afterwards buy the electricity from the developer, which ultimately tends to be a state utility that is exposed naturally to the country risk. And this is one of the key risks that we need to mitigate, the case of default from the utility. And this is an aspect that will also be eager to hear from the financiers, and two other aspects that we also consider very relevant at the project level, which is establishing a strong creditworthiness power purchase agreement that creates stable income for the project developer, and as well a series of credit guarantees and risk mitigation instruments that can involve, for instance, political risk insurance, partial risk guarantees, letters of credit that give us the comfort that we can develop a project in a country. And the third aspect that I would like to highlight has been the contribution that GreenVenture has done to the Global Gateway Initiative. So since last year, the company and its business group have answered the European Union Commission call to integrate the business advisory group of the Global Gateway, a group where only 2 companies from Portugal are present. One of them is us. And in this business advisory group, we have presented our vision and comments, for instance, 2 upcoming EU flagship projects, as well as help identifying the constraints for private sector investment in emerging markets. So we believe that it is important for the EU to hear the voice of the private sector, because we are on the ground daily and experience the real challenges of developing greenfield projects in Africa, Latin America, and other markets. So I'll stop here, and after this will be this overview. I think it will be interesting to hear the perspective of the financiers. And over to you, Isabel, and thank you. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Miguel, and thank you for highlighting the main challenges and the main indicators or aspects that an investor is looking for when choosing to invest in a renewable energy project. Well, I would say everywhere, but in Africa in particular. I don't know if you followed, but there was a lot of interest to the figures you have presented. So if you want to put them in a slide, I think everyone would be very interested in having access to them after the event. But this is also a challenge when the speakers don't have a slide. It means we have to be more focused on what they are saying. So going to our speakers, I would like to give the floor first to Alina Orrico from EDFI. I don't know if you all know, EDFI is the association representing the collective interest of 15 European development finance institutions. And at EDFI, Alina serves as the Team Europe and Global Gateway Advisor. So Alina, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Isabel. Thanks for that introduction. I'm happy to be here with you. Especially grateful with Miguel and organizers for inviting me to speak. Indeed, Miguel and I, we know each other through the business advisory group of the Global Gateway. And yes, just great to share with you some of what we do at the association. Let me share with you my presentation so that you can get a sense of how we operate as the umbrella association of the 15 development finance institutions. We are 15 members, so the EDFI membership would comprise EU-backed or publicly backed government-owned development finance institutions, mostly banks from around Europe. We include also 2 non-EU members, British International Investment and the CIFM from Switzerland. And we have affiliates from across the globe as well, the United States, FinDev Canada, and Japan. These development finance institutions have the same trait that they share is that they are mandated for impact and to invest in development countries, and they are also publicly backed by their governments to do so. And very important is to note that we only invest in private sector operations, mainly supporting private sector in the countries that we work in. This is a snapshot of the portfolio of the EDFIs. There's a global portfolio of 52.6 billion BN as of end of 2023. This is a portfolio that has grown exponentially over the past years. To give you an idea, it's been growing for more than 20 billion over the past 10 years, and there's investments across 3 different classifications of investments. 4% is on a small percentage of 4% that would be on guaranteeing coverage for investments. The vast majority is given as loans, and there's 46% in equity and quasi-equity investments in the portfolio of the DFIs. From the region of interest to us today, there are regional investments that amount to 5% of the portfolio of the DFIs. But if you look at the entire sub-Saharan Africa, the investments are the vast majority of the portfolio, amounting up to 34%. 17.7 billion would go to sub-Saharan Africa, while 3.5 billion, 7% of the portfolio, would go to the Middle East and North Africa. And the sectors that the DFIs typically operate are the financial sector, where they're investing also in infrastructure, the industry and manufacturing, the agribusiness is pretty big, and the services sector, and there's also multi-sector covering all sorts of, from health to digital investments, but greatly energy is there in the form of infrastructure, financial sector, and it's an important sector that the DFIs are following as well. The numbers of 2023 show us that there's been growth in African investments, which is remarkable if we consider the panorama of the region and the global trends. What we're seeing here is that the DFIs are still active in Africa. They've grown their investments up to 12% compared to 2022. So there's been a rise of 3.8 billion in Africa. The commitments of 2023 in the portfolio also indicate that the DFIs are actively investing in climate and also actively investing in gender and SMEs support. This is pretty much what the DFIs are actively investing in 2023 with the latest numbers that we have. The regional distribution of the percentages of new investments also indicate that the sub-Saharan African region is still amounting to 31% of the portfolio compared to the rest of the region. Local currency financing is what you see on the right, on the bottom. This is crucial in the context of this region because, as Miguel just exposed, the cost of capital is quite high. This has a lot to do with local currencies being volatile, and there's a lot to do in this regard. There are solutions that the DFIs are working on in this sense. Happy to share with you some insights on that as well. And very crucial, the work that the DFIs do as very, very patient investors, the work that they do with the least developing countries, LDCs. that has risen up to 5% compared to 2022. The impact-focused investments of the EDFIs really indicate that that they are contributing to these SDG targets for climate. In 2023, you will see an increase of climate, SME, and gender, and the LDCs. This is what I would highlight from the latest trend and what they are investing and looking at the most. Climate, energy, climate action, that would count as one of the top priority focus of investments of the DFIs. Now, the broader European offer, I would like to situate you just to get a sense of how we compare ourselves to the European Investment Bank or the EBRD. The EDFI account for the 51% of the totality of the private sector investments from the European development finance architecture. This is what we call the EU collective offer in development finance. The DFIs that we represent are private sector investments, are the main player of private sector investments worldwide, and providing support to those financial flows that goes outside the countries, outside the EU. Now, we are supporting what you might have heard of the Team Europe and the Global Gateway Strategy. The Global Gateway Strategy was announced in 2021 by Ursula von der Leyen. This is the EU policy that the European Commission is prioritizing. The Team Europe approach has been something that was there since 2020 with the COVID response. And essentially what this tells us is that we need to work with our whole of government approach within the EU institutions, the EU modalities, the EU tools, and the EU financial options that there exist to provide private sector development abroad. So we welcome this Team Europe approach, which is essentially telling us to work together closer and in coordination with all the development actors worldwide. Now this expands as well to the export credit agencies. And this is how the Global Gateway Strategy is telling us that we should be generating sizable impact in our activities. So the type of thing that we do at the association, this is how we support our DFIs, is to screen opportunities within Global Gateway, the strategy itself, the initiatives of Global Gateway, the flagships of Global Gateway, the Team Europe initiatives, everything that's happening at the EU delegations at the countries that we work with. We are screening all of these trends and what we can collectively do with this EU framework. So I really want to stress this point that we are looking at the Global Gateway Strategy as the framework for collaboration with other private companies, with other actors that are European, that are there in the countries that we're working with, so that we all know what everybody's working with and how we can crowd in investments that are contributing to EU policy objectives. So this is how we have committed to follow these projects in different categories, different sectors. There are corridors that are very interesting for you to keep a track of. Some of them are public. Most of them are public, I would say. If you look at these Global Gateway flagships, and this is my slide right here, these are just the regional flagship projects that have been publicized under the Global Gateway. And these are flagships that are prioritized for this year. There's one in particular that is of interest of the Lusófona countries that we are focusing on today. That would be this regional Southern and Eastern Africa to your right. There is a construction of a fiber optic connectivity project type of project that is aiming to also channel investments in Mozambique, but also in Malawi, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and across the DRC. These are very tangible connectivity projects that we are following on behalf of the DFIs to see where there are DFI entry points for investment and it would be the typical project that would fall under the Global Gateway strategy. Also, on the energy side, we need to mention the Lobito corridor, which is also covering Angola, and this is a very extensive transatlantic effort within the G7 that this project has been pretty much conceived to invest in corridors of railways that would take and that would take also not just the critical raw material extraction, but also energy storage, and there are components that relate to energy self-sufficiency, and it's worth exploring because it's quite an interesting one. But I would like to focus on the Green Deal in Mozambique, so you get a sense of the type of projects that we're screening on behalf of the DFIs in the energy sector. This is a real Team Europe initiative that is happening on the ground. It's essentially a project that was identified by the different EU countries in Mozambique, and this project in particular is pretty much all the initiatives, of the EU actors and the European development partners all together collectively as Team Europe. They have put this together, and they are stating how they are supporting. Now, this will hopefully have a crowd-in effect of if someone else from the European Union is doing an intervention here, then others might be just adding a crowd-in effect so that more investments can be channeled in this area. The area is Green Deal more broadly, but in renewable energy, you will see that construction of a solar power plant was there in the first semester of 2023, and there's also essentially construction of wind power plants in 2025 that is envisaged as well, and another power plant in 2024 this year in the second semester is also planned in Manje and Lixinga. The modalities and the tools are all the EU modalities and tools that can be offered to the just to get a traction of this Team Europe initiative, from technical assistance to grants to the EU guarantees, which are essentially backed up investments covered by the EU. There's loans and blending envisaged in here. So happy to share with you how this evolves in the near future.
Alina, could you? Perfect.
There we go. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can get us.
Thank you, Alina, for your presentation. Thank you for highlighting the mechanisms, and in particular how this is taking place in Mozambique. So we've been also very active. We were partners of the Global Gateway Investment Forum last year in Mozambique, where all these projects were highlighted, and we've organized the day after our Renewables in Mozambique conference, RENMOS, and we will organize this year again, and all these projects and mechanisms will be featured. So I hope, Alina, you can join us in Maputo in November, and all the participants.
I'd love to. Isabel, I would just like to mention one thing before I forget, because I do have my colleague Corentin connected here in the meeting. This is the EDFI Association representing the DFIs. I've showed you the mechanisms that we are following on behalf of the DFIs, but Corentin will introduce that himself. But the EDFI Association, well, more likely the DFI members have created the management company of EDFI, which is the one that Corentin is currently working on. And the DFIs created the management company to provide mainly early stage blending, funding opportunities and direct investments in that area, but also de-risking solutions with the EU guarantees at the growth stage, and at the expansion stage, there's co-financing platforms. So Corentin will be expanding on how these companies that are connected here, they'll be interested in what we have to offer as well in more concretely.
Perfect. And I'm very happy to see how each presentation today is part of a puzzle that you've showed here. You are you represent 51%, but we don't have the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, but we have EIB, and then we'll have more concrete examples with GET.invest and Electrify. But it's good to see all the mechanisms, all the EU mechanisms and the EU structures working together as Team Europe. And so I've mentioned already the event where Electrify was also there, GET.invest was also there. And to show you the link between all these players, I also invite you to consult the GET.invest funding database. I will right here the link in the chat, where you can find all the specific mechanisms and instruments from each DFI available for projects in or for investments in the renewable energy sector. So it's just another tool where you can find more information. Okay, continuing with the presentations and with the link between all these European institutions, I now invite João Fonseca Santos from the European Investment Bank to present EIB priorities and an overview of their support mechanisms.
Hello, Isabel. Can you hear me? Hello.
Yes.
Good morning to all. Yes. Perfect. I'll just very quickly share my screen so you can see my presentation. And okay, can you see the slides? Just for
Yes.
Are the slides on? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Perfect. Well, thank you very much for the invitation to ALER, and also for bringing the EIB to this discussion. We'll see that I will touch base during my presentation of the many points that Alina previously also mentioned, and as you said before, it's exactly what we want to show, is that we need to work together in many common projects and areas of development, so we can support these very ambitious goals that we have in front of us. So you will see in my presentation there are some differences from EDFI. The main one is that also the EIB supports the public sector and is only not focused on the private sector, although mobilization of private sector is essential to meet the very ambitious goals of the green and digital transition. So I will start by the beginning. So for the ones that are not very familiar with the European Investment Bank, we are today one of the world's largest multilateral lenders and borrowers in the capital markets. Just to give you an idea, the bank borrows, issues a lot of its balance sheet from the capital markets, and we do it also by developing the green bond market, which is a very important segment for us. And then we are a European institution. We are fully owned by the member states of the European Union, and our objective is to implement EU policies in line with the orientations from our member states and the European Commission. And also we need to act as a bridge between the public policies and also the private sector, so we reach our goals. In terms of giving you an idea about the bank activity, we did about 88 billion only in 2023, and this leads for having a very robust and big balance sheet. We are talking of a balance sheet that is over 550 billions, and the majority of the activity is done inside the EU. At the end of the day, we are the European Investment Bank, but we also have a big part and a growing part of our activity also dedicated for outside the EU. To give you an example, last year we did about 8.4 billion of new operations, meaning EIB loans, guarantees, equity instruments that were provided outside the EU, and we have also a long-standing presence in several countries. We are an institution that is headquartered in Luxembourg. We have more than 400 staff, and besides, like many, we have more than just a financier. we also have teams of engineers and economists that help supporting the project's implementation in the ground. And nowadays we have more than 60 offices around the world, meaning that we have more offices already outside the EU than inside the European Union. In terms of our positioning outside the EU, and not to lose too much time before going on the energy sector, so the EIB sees that as many MDBs that are also present today, that the challenges that we face are global, and we cannot solve them only in Europe. We need to do it worldwide. We are talking about climate change, pandemics, and migration issues that need global responses. For that, in 2022, although we had a presence that is historical outside the EU, we decided to launch EIB Global, where we have now a dedicated branch of all activities of the EIB outside the European Union, and is a structure that is designed to foster partnerships with the European Commission, with the member states, with all the European development agencies, and also naturally with other multilateral development banks. Our priorities are very clear. We aim to contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. We are aligned with the Global Gateway objectives, so areas that are digital, climate and energy, transportation, health and education are very close to the EIB strategy. Naturally also of the European Green Deal outside the EU, and the just transition, because we have this imperative that we need to support all countries and regions the best we can in making this transition. We have regions that are very similar to the ones that were presented in the previous presentation, just between southern and eastern neighborhood, enlargement countries of the EU, sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, and Pacific and Asia. In terms of global numbers, sub-Saharan Africa plays a very important role for the EIB activities. About 30% of the 8.4 billion, which is 2.4 billion, that we do outside the EU is dedicated to sub-Saharan Africa. So it's 30%. It's a very, very important area of activity for the EIB. Now focusing more on supporting the energy sector and naturally the renewable energy sector in Africa. Well, the main challenges, they were very, very well brought up from the discussion from Miguel. I'll add two main ideas, but the many that were presented are all very strong arguments, but we have two main issues. We have a lack of access to electricity by a considerable part of the population, and we have lack of sufficient financing, something that we need to work together to develop instruments that can support this lack of financing. And we have also, which is not in the slide, a considerable increase in debt by several countries in the region. Just to give you an idea, since 2010 until 2021, the African bond market sovereign debt issued increased by 22 times. This means that not only we have a lack of financing, but we also need to be aware that many of the public sector promoters also face increase indebtedness level, and so the prioritization of projects need to be very well taken into consideration by the promoters, and as such, we need to develop instruments that can support also this growing problem of increasing indebtedness. So in terms of also another number in 2022, also we were coming out of the COVID crisis, but the fundraising in Africa for venture capital and private equity also decreased about 30% at that time. Now it's recovering again. So just to give you an idea, not only we have the problem of lack of financing, we also have increased leverage. And we know that scaling renewable energy is a challenge because it needs vast financing needs, and also need to find the right bankable and sustainable project opportunities. So this is where we work in GIB together with in Team Europe Spirit, with the European Commission, member states, and other multilateral development banks to find instruments that allow us to mobilize the private sector. And for that, as already was mentioned, we have a toolkit of loans, guarantee, blending, technical assistance, equity, quasi-equity. So anything that can find the right toolbox for that specific project. And also we need to provide upstream support for capacity building, namely technical assistance, not only for developing projects, but also to find the right sourcing capacities, because sometimes the projects are good, they might not be bankable, but with some technical assistance, some grants, we can make that project work. So this is the kind of work we need to do when assessing a project. With this, nothing better than give you some example of initiatives. I picked these ones because they are done with many stakeholders, so it shows the commitment of working together to achieve for our goals. So the first one is the European Guarantee for Renewable Energy. So it's a platform where we have several players contributing to facilitate the emergence of bankable renewable energy projects, and by supporting essentially international independent power producer. So this is a mix of guarantees and technical assistance, and this was put together by the European Investment Bank, by AFD, Agence Française de Développement, CDP in Italy, and KfW in Germany. This basically consists of what I was saying. Only lending might not be enough. So, and also to tackle one of the issues that Miguel mentioned very well on the introduction. So when we have, for example, problem of the off-taker of the energy contracts that are normally can be private or public sector and utility companies, what we developed was a mechanism where we can, for example, provide a first lost piece guarantee to the independent power producer, to in case there is a non-payment of the offtake agreement when a project is developed, and then we can add other layers in the platforms such as second loss piece guarantees, even liquidity mechanisms, and together we can build up this project with technical assistance. Because of course, to have a structure where we implement guarantees, you have a complex project that to be executed. So to also provide to the promoter some technical assistance package is important to make the project happen. So this is, for example, a good example of when we have our toolbox, guarantees, loans, technical assistance that we can put them to work together. So we tackle some of the problems that were identified. In this case, this project is very directed to de-risk the risk existing on the offtake contracts, for example. We have other initiatives such as Renew Africa, which is a platform with European public and private stakeholders that is covering the whole renewable energy value chain in 48 African countries, and that focus a lot on the capacity building so that we can improve the sourcing of new projects, the project preparation also, and also support the different countries in implementing policies in case of needs regarding specific areas of the renewable energy value chain. We have also another initiative that is the insere-se, which is to scale up also and increase the number of projects that we can source and finance in this area. So this is basically it. I hope that it was clear that there are three messages that I want to take away from my presentation. Is that first, we need to work together because the challenges and the lack of financing is a very relevant problem. So we need to put our expertise, our instruments to work to mobilize not only the public sector, but also the private sector. We work in line with the priorities of the European Union, but of course, that are also very close to the SDGs. So when you talk about the Global Gateway Initiative, for example. And secondly, we have expertise inside and outside the EU that we can bring together to make these projects a reality. So you can count on the IB and all MDBs on these very ambitious targets that we have, but that we need to very critically implement together. Thank you.
Thank you, João. Thank you for this overview of EIB. Regarding the example you've presented on EGRE, EGRE is also guaranteeing the off-taker risk of the ALER project in Mozambique. So the first tender for renewable energy projects in Mozambique for 3 solar power plants and 1 wind farm is going to be guaranteed through EGRE, and this is going to be provided through a DFI called AFD. So once again, all these players working together in an example of a Portuguese-speaking countries. I forgot to mention earlier when Alina was presenting, she highlighted that one of the impact themes or the impact theme with the highest amount of investment is climate. And I would say energy is included under climate. But this link between climate and energy is something that ALER would like to explore in the coming years, especially examining and following the outcomes of the next COP, where the climate finance will be the main topic, and defining the loss and damage fund and all different mechanisms for climate finance. And we're going to organize an event on the 2nd of July here in Lisbon about the contribution of climate finance mechanisms for the accelerating energy transition in African or in the all Portuguese-speaking countries. And we're going to have 4 webinars following different topics, and the first one is private investment. I will actually come back to each of the speakers about that. We invite you to participate, but of course all the other participants are invited to join us. This will be launched tomorrow, because tomorrow is the Global Environment Day, as you might know. So you are receiving this information firsthand, because the official launch is only tomorrow. But I invite you to go to our website to learn more about this. And so this is once again to show that we are all aligned and covering the same topics. So now continuing, I invite Sebastian von Wolf from GET.invest Finance Catalyst. So GET.invest has several services. It's one of our proud partners. At least we are very proud to be your partners and working together. We've organized several events in Mozambique and in Angola, and I think you will be very interested to learn about what GET.invest has to offer. So Sebastian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Isabel. Thanks to everyone. Thanks for having me. And it's always a pleasure to be working with you, with ALER. And we actually go way back of several activities we've done together in Mozambique. So happy to tell you and the audience a bit more about GET.invest and what we do and what we have to offer. GET.invest is a European program, but I come to that. So let me share a couple of slides with you, and I hope this is going to work. If not, let me know. Here we are.
Perfect.
Yeah, works. Good. Excellent. Okay. GET.invest, a European program. As I said, why did we set this up? There we go. That's the challenge. And I mean, GET.invest is a program which has been around. It has had different names, but it's been around since 2016. And still there's many work to be done. What we have understood in the beginning is that there's a certain challenge out there in the mainly sort of sub-Saharan African energy market, which is our focus area, that there is obviously much more investment needed. We heard some numbers here already, 600 million already still without access to energy, and some other numbers, they're all known. So much more and much faster investments are needed. We also know by a recent study from Climate Analytics, for example, that we need 5 times as much investment and 5 times as much projects and 5 times faster deployment to reach some level of SDG on the energy side. We also understood the challenge that there is, besides the fact that we're too slow, that there's a lot of complexity out there. Many companies, financiers, don't really connect. Yeah, so they have their different buckets, they have the different focus areas. Project developers often come sort of from a very pragmatical side and don't fully understand sort of how sort of financiers talk, what's the finance talk. So there's this disconnect between the private sector and the financier. So that's the first assumption and also analysis we did. It was also very clear that the solution is needed for this. Someone has to speak both languages, the financier's language and the project's language, which is a very often sort of very hands-on technical engineers talk. And I myself have sort of both heads in my life, and I know that this is exactly something daily needed, the communication between the two sides. So this is the challenge we analyzed while we set up GET.invest. The solution to this is by now, I would say, the leading European program on mobilizing investments in renewable energy. It's also the one-stop shop of the Team Europe, Africa, EU Green Energy Initiative. So it has grown quite a bit since 2016. Also, our donor base or contributor base has grown quite a bit. We are a EU-funded program, also supported by Germany, by Norway, by Denmark, by Sweden, and also Austria. And what have we developed? What is our solution to the topic? Is that we are really providing an on-demand facility for projects to advise them on how to become bankable and how to access finance. This sounds simple, but I would say one of the key ingredients here is that we really act as honest broker. That means, yes, and I think, Isabel, you've mentioned this before, we do have a very, very deep database on all available financiers. And yes, we are very closely connected with European DFIs, with European instruments. At the same time, we're still acting as an honest broker. So we always look for the best solution when we advise projects and companies on accessing finance. So this is key for us, and we don't deviate from this. Besides that, the other sort of key success factor, I would say, is that we work with a large number of experts. Many of them are located in our target region in Sub-Saharan Africa, and they all have a long history of project finance, of advising on finance. So they know exactly what they talk about, and they are sitting with the companies and the businesses to help them accessing the most relevant and the most fitting funding for their projects or for their businesses. We are technology agnostic as long as we talk about green energy. We've also expanded into hydrogen recently. We do e-mobility. You find all the details on the website. So we are quite broad, whatever it takes to support access to clean energy. Yes, we are a global program, but our target region is Sub-Saharan Africa, Caribbean, Pacific as well. And we are implemented by GIZ, which is the German Development Corporation. Moving on, next slide, how we do this. I mean, I already mentioned this. We have a large number of advisors out in the field. We have also additional activities which we do. We provide country information, country data. So we do market studies. We do mobilization activities quite a bit. We go to conferences because we always need to make sure that everyone out there who's a developer or who's a project knows about us. And we're really going deep. We also want the smaller ones. We really want also the domestic developers and projects to also know about us. And they should know how to access our support. The support is free of charge. It's sort of, it's always open in terms of application on the website. There's an apply here button. and then it goes into our process. And I come to a couple of numbers on the next slide on how many we have already advised. Just on this one here, the ideal sort of setup is, yes, we provide information on the markets, we mobilize the market, we work with associations like ALER. We do also now increasingly work with the financial sector. We're going to work with domestic banks, but I'm not going into details here. That would be a separate presentation. We're going to work with domestic banks to mobilize more local currency funding, because we see this as an increasing need, to also as addition to a lot of hard currency funding, which we see also, which we have here on the panel. And the key component, of course, stays the finance access advisory, which is the finance catalyst, and the finance readiness support, which is doing exactly what I just mentioned, the coaching and the advisory as an honest broker to find the best funding or financing solution. A couple of numbers on the finance catalyst, which is the core service. By now, we have received more than 1,500 applications. Of course, some of them are not viable. So this the funnel here shows a little bit sort of how we work. We check all these applications. We then select the supported ones, and we've already supported more than 400 by now. This data is actually also a couple of weeks old, so we're moving close to 500 right now. And this is also sort of a pretty standard number. We are supporting almost 200 projects and companies as we speak. Out of these, in the last couple of years, almost 200 have been accepted by financiers, meaning they are in deep discussions on, based on term sheet to really move to a financial close. So this would reflect, if all this materializes, it reflects almost 3 billion euros of investments. And we are proud that we have by now supported more than 90 financial closes, which really led to mobilized investment of almost 500 million euros. Moving on, also looking at the time. Besides the finance catalyst, I mentioned this briefly, we are also now increasingly working with the financial sector. And I'm setting up this new service. It's called Edge Finance, enabling domestic green energy finance. We are still in the inception phase, but as of September this year, we will also make more noise about this, do more communication. And clearly, this is aiming at the domestic financial sector because we believe they should play a stronger role. And to the colleagues here also from EDFI, EIB, I think it's interesting that we also have a very clear mandate to support the utilization of DFI guarantees, hedging instruments via the financial sector. So we will be training, we will be coaching the local banks, the ones which are really keen to develop this, and we will try to make the link similar as we do with the projects, linking them to the correct finance or the best financiers. We will also try to help the local financial sector to access the ideal, for them, ideal funding, blending, guarantee, whatever is out there based on also EFSD plus funding. That's just as a sort of outlook on going forward, what will come in the future. Since we talked about Mozambique before already, I also wanted to give you a very brief intro on how we work in specific countries. This is the Mozambican example, probably interesting for you. While we work on an application for everyone basis, especially with our services on finance access, we also in cases have focus countries or country windows, as we call them. This is also countries where we get specific additional funding. So we have a very strong focus on Mozambique, for example. And there we do much more than waiting for applications. We really go deep. We really do additional market studies. In Mozambique, we've done on rooftop solar, grid-connected projects. We do a lot of mobilization. We have by now supported 15 events in Mozambique with 3,000 participants plus. We work with associations, obviously, and we also organize matchmaking meetings. This is really on the ground opportunity for project developers to talk to our advisors and this is linked to conferences, to activities. We have supported more than 20 projects by now, and 4 of them are already at financial close. So we've been quite successful in Mozambique. And we had also in a pilot case or in a pilot project already worked with 4 Mozambican banks, provided them with tailored coaching and trainings. And this is a little bit of a blueprint of what we're going to do bigger now across the whole region, and which we are now calling Edge Finance, enabling domestic green energy finance. Looking at the time, I think we could also talk about the work which we are doing on the public sector side with our sister project, GET.transform. They are working with the government. They're also increasing the activities now. We are expecting additional funding from the delegation going forward for both GET.invest but also for GET.transform on really supporting developing the right regulatory framework for renewable energy developments in the country. The last slide, just as a reminder and to recap this, and since this is a very European panel here, to make this clear again, we are the Team Europe one-stop shop for green energy investments, and very proud of this, that we have been announced a bit like a year ago. And we really sort of building up to that expectations to be the single entry point for green energy projects and companies. And I think we have, at least for our target region, achieved this already. We are by far the biggest provider of this support. It's free of charge. And we are aiming to also do this now with the financial sector moving forward. I leave it at that for now. I'm sure questions can be asked. Please put them in the chat or also contact me directly afterwards. Thanks a lot. And over to you, Isabel.
Thank you, Sebastian. It's always a pleasure to listen to your presentation. Of course, as you mentioned, we've organized together 15 events or so in Mozambique, so it's not not the first time I see it. Exactly. But you keep on innovating, and that's good. So I can see the evolution and the edge financing service that you will provide will definitely make a difference and an impact at local level. I would say that we have the Mozambique example has been mentioned here several times. Of course, as a Lusófona association, we are not only active in Mozambique. There are several, but I would say there are several degrees of maturity of the markets, and Mozambique is now on the tip of maturity with a lot of projects, a policy framework which is favorable for investments and tenders for new projects. But I would say that even more mature than Mozambique is Cape Verde. And the reason why I believe that the country hasn't been mentioned much today is because this would be a very good example of the finance sector advisory services, because in Cape Verde, projects are already financed by commercial banks. And I would say this is the objective where we would like to see Mozambique with the support of GET.invest and other projects. What we would like to see is ALER as in the next similar event, we would be having, for example, Angola or Guinea-Bissau as markets for GET.invest and other projects or other programs. And just to sum up, so when Sebastian says that GET.invest is a one-stop shop, it means that if you want to have access to financing from any other institution or European mechanism, including the EIB, one of the DFIs, or even Electrify, you can go first to GET.invest, and they will analyze your project for free. And then they will tell you what is the best instrument for your project, and they will also tell you if you have a bankable project. So if you can continue through the funnel, the objective is you reach the tip of the funnel, and they will guide you through the process. And congratulations for the work that you've been doing and for the 90 projects you have already reached financial close. So last but not least, we have Corentin Villiers from from the Electrification Financing Initiative, Electrify. So it will also be a pleasure to learn. Once again, it's not the first time I see this presentation, but I believe it will be the first time to many of the participants, and I believe it will be very interesting for you to learn about this instrument and what they have been doing. So, Corentin.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Isabel. And I'm just sharing my. Just a moment. Okay, so very pleased that I've been invited to present Electrify, and I know you already heard a lot of information and saw quite a few investment or presentations and PowerPoint. So I'll try to be very concise and to the point on what we do and how you could potentially benefit of what we are offering. So first of all, I work for Electrify, which is a fund that is primarily investing in sub-Saharan Africa. So I'm an investment officer, so directly working with entrepreneurs, with companies that are looking for access to funding, especially in the renewable energy sector. So as our name actually concretely says it, Electrify, we really aim at electrifying and providing energy access in areas that are either not connected or that are suffering from poor grid electricity or unreliable electricity. So maybe just a quick word on how it started, and I'll make a link with Alina's presentation from EDFI. So the fund electrifies under the umbrella of a management company, which is called EDFI Management Company. And it was created by the 15 European DFIs that Alina mentioned in the first presentation of this webinar. And the idea of creating EDFI Management Company was, amongst other, really to address a structural issue in developing countries, mainly by providing capital to the private sector that are not yet able to access commercial funding, just also to make a link with what Isabel was mentioning. And so that's basically how we started with Electrify in 2016. And since then, you can see on this graph that our portfolio actually grew very fast, because now we manage over 250 million euros and still doing the same, trying to achieve the same mandate, which is increasing access to clean energy, as you can see on the right-hand side. Very concretely, where do we invest? We invest in business models such as solar home system companies, mini-grid projects or companies, smaller IPPs, but also CNI, so solar rooftop installations or solar capacity for the SMEs or the agricultural industries. But also increasingly, we look at clean cooking projects or companies. So going to the next slide, this shows on a very high level view that we are very committed to delivering impact. Why? Because Electrify is funded by 100% by the European Union. And as we mentioned repeatedly, that the EU is committed to creating long-standing impact. So this gives you some quick figures about some of the impact that we created in recent years. So today we have reached over 13 million beneficiaries and have helped to install more than 200 megawatts of renewable energy, primarily in sub-Saharan Africa. You can see 75 projects, 75% of our investments are in sub-Saharan Africa. So we are also linked to the Global Gateway Initiative. We're also trying to promote gender diversity in every investment that we do, and are following also the SDG approach and number 7, primarily which is affordable and clean energy. I think this slide is quite important for the audience because it shows very clearly where we intervene, and we can't do it all. So we know that the investment spectrum includes a range of different investors depending on the stage of maturity of your business, of your company, or where you are. So it shows here that we support companies, entrepreneurs, or projects, not at the incubation stage, but at the stage just after. So it's quite important, and I really want to emphasize that, because we look at early stage investments, that's true, but still we do not invest at incubation stage, where these organizations would typically look for investments from either grant support, or could be also supported by organizations like GET.invest, as Sebastian just mentioned earlier. But we invest at initial growth, so looking at already some commercial traction, and we would provide catalytic capital to help the project and the business to scale the operations in order to attract then commercial funding. And you can see then on the slide that the next stage would be scaling of operations, attracting financing from banks or even DFIs. This slide shows you where we are in terms of global footprint. So we are quite spread all over the world, with a main focus on sub-Saharan Africa, where 75% of our projects are. So it gives you a few names of our portfolio companies, but I'll give you more explanations on the portfolio investments on the next slides. But it also shows that we tend to work with, you can see on the left-hand side, with the global facility. So technically, we could invest all over the world in emerging markets, but also what we call the country windows. And very specifically, we have launched a country window in 2022 for Mozambique, which is an envelope of 15 million euros that is dedicated to Mozambican investments. This slide is also quite illustrative, because it explains very concretely what are the investment criteria and what is our offering. So I mentioned it already. We look at renewable energy and private sector investments. So investing in clean energy, I mentioned the business models, which are, again, solar home systems, mini-grid, CNI, clean cooking technologies. We look at commercially viable projects. So this is also very important to understand that we are investors. So we would look at your business plan. We would challenge also the viability. So we need to look at bankable and commercially viable project, because this is also for us, it's a key belief that we can achieve the better impact if we have commercial viable businesses, if we have businesses that work. We look at very strict ESG standards, so because we are also funded by the European Union, and we look at the track record also of the businesses. So technically and very practically, what do we offer? We have instruments that can start from 500,000 euros up to 10 million euros, and we can fund up to a maximum of 50% of the total projects, of the total funding needs. So we're quite flexible in terms of instruments. We can invest in direct equity, so investing in the capital of the business directly, but we could also provide loans, from junior loans up to senior loans. So it's very dependent on a case-to-case basis and what the company or the project needs. This is an example. This is a screenshot of our portfolio. So maybe you heard or you saw, you recognize some familiar names. So you can see that we invested in various different instruments, from senior debt to quasi-equity in different companies. So just to give you a few examples, Simisolar, that you can see here in Tanzania, is a productive use company selling solar water pumps solutions to really solve some of the irrigation problems that we can see in Tanzania. And they're also present in Uganda. You have another example in West Africa this time, a company which is called ALER, It's a multi-services off-grid company, also selling solar home systems, but also building mini grids, being an EPC operator in West Africa and growing quite fast in neighboring countries, also in Togo, in Niger, Burkina Faso. And here you have also different types of investments that we do to also illustrate, for example, that we can provide senior debt that we did for a company called Husk Power Systems in India. It's now, I believe, one of the largest mini grids operator. They have over 190 mini grids in North India. And then the idea was really to support the construction of the assets. And so that's how we've designed the senior debt for this company. I just want to make a quick focus on one of our investment company, which is called Solarize Africa. It's a CNI developer, so really providing solar installations for the SME or small industry sector. And they're expanding very fast in South Africa and Kenya. And so we've been a very long-term investor for this company. So having made our first investment in 2019 in equity directly, because we wanted to support the operations, so really hiring new staff capacity to help the company to expand. And you can see, I'm not sure if you see my screen fully, but that we have renewed our investments in 2020. And we have also provided catalytic support, so meaning also crowding in other investors like DFIs. Here you have the French Proparco and Bio who also co-invested in Solarize. So these slides perfectly illustrates the kind of approach that we have at Electrify. So being a patient and long-term investor to achieve the most impact possible. So here total targeted beneficiaries is over close to 70,000 people, with quite a significant amount of annual output energy of renewable capacity generated. So I think I'll stop here. And again, to make a link with Sebastian, we are happy to look at investment opportunities in sub-Saharan Africa, in Lusófona countries especially. So if you have interesting projects that you think could qualify with the investment criteria that we have, feel free to reach out either through GET.invest or through us directly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Corentin, and thank you for providing these examples. So we had two comments while you were presenting, both from Angola, and this shows that EU mechanisms, and in particular Electrify, is already supporting and financing companies operating in the off-grid space. So solar irrigation was mentioned, solar home systems, mini grids. So this is a sector that Electrify is looking at. And there is also an example in Mozambique with solar works. And I would invite, there's a participant from a renewable energy project in Angola, and maybe you can get in touch with them and see if you could apply for funding. Okay, so now that we've gone through all the mechanisms and from the EU, let's go back to the private sector. And I would invite Edgar Arriere to present GreenVenture, the type of projects they are developing, and what type of financing they are looking for, and how this link between EU financing mechanisms and private sector can take place. Edgar.
Very well, thank you, Isabel. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for participating in this presentation. I have a small presentation over here. Let me just share it with the audience. So, but I can start already. GreenVenture is a Portuguese company which is integrated in a group of companies operating on the renewable Okay. Everyone is seeing my presentation. And GreenVenture it's operating on the private sector and on the development of renewable energy projects. It was established in 2019, and it is born from the conglomerate of companies that operate on the construction of renewable projects, which is CJR groups, and currently operates on the sourcing and development of projects, on the construction of those projects, and of course also on the operation of those projects, and of course financing the implementation of those projects, and of course that also requiring external financing either from commercial banks and other kind of institutions. We act since the beginning of the implementation of the projects, so from the scratch, from selection of land, then doing all the development activities from permitting up to reaching the ready-to-build stage, and of course the construction and financing of those projects. Then we also we have companies on the group that our sister company is capable to execute the EPC works and the implementation of the assets that have been developed by our company. And then, of course, we are capable to do the management of the portfolio and optimization of the asset. Based and concerning our activities in Africa, we are, of course, studying several investments on the African continent, and we are willing to expand our activities not just from Europe, but to Africa also, as we see Africa as a continent with a lot of potential, where several increase on the capacity is needed, and of course with also some challenges where there are opportunities. That is a market with the enormous growth potential, with some countries with government support and incentives, namely Mozambique and Cape Verde, as already spoken, and that are countries where we are interested on, that have well-designed policies and development plans for this kind of projects. In some of other countries, that's not exactly the case. Also, it's a continent that will require some technical advancements in order that some innovations can be established. And of course, besides this, the corporate social responsibility, it's also a trigger on our activities. There are, of course, several challenges to implement this kind of projects in the African continent, and namely some lack of infrastructures and grid access. There are, of course, regulatory and political risks that needs to be mitigated so that a project is viable. Any projects only will exist if it is profitable. There are, of course, as identified, some financial barriers, and in several cases, some lack of capability on the human resources in several countries. So we believe that the strategic approach should be taken in consideration, leveraging partnerships and innovating and aligning the policies of the countries with the interests of the private sector in investing in those kind of countries, enabling the capability to develop projects that are projects with quality, because there's something that we assist the need to have projects with quality. Otherwise, there will not be any kind of financing to be put in place if the projects are not well developed, in order to explore all the renewable capacity and potential that we have on the African continent. Thank you very much, Isabel.
Thank you, Edgar, for this overview. And now switching quickly to Miguel, so he can present GreenVenture projects in the Portuguese-speaking countries.
Thanks, Isabel. Thanks, Edgar, for the overview. I will briefly, given the time constraint, I'll briefly focus on Mozambique, where we had been last week, and it has been widely discussed in today's webinar, where we see great potential, but in which as well there are some challenges which I would like to address in terms of the business environment of the renewable energy sector. We're currently analyzing projects in the country early stage where we would like to focus, and things that we see in the business environment compared to Europe. So we do see that there's high informality in the business culture, which is it's challenging sometimes to navigate when we have the European standards. Starting a business is as well highly bureaucratic, and this involves many institutions, public institutions, the banking sector, registry with the central bank as a foreign investor, and so on and so forth. So to have a business up to speed. As well in our sector, dealing with permits and licensing takes a long time. So have to deal with many institutions. This goes already into the micro level in terms of license to operate. Another aspect that we do see very seriously is the land rights and community engagement. That has to be taken seriously. This is very important in terms of project development in Mozambique, and an area where we are devoting efforts in our project development. And something as well that I would like to stress that we focus are partnerships. So we do see partnerships with local developers as essential, people that understand the lay of the land, that have boots on the ground, and with whom we can trust to lead the project to ready to build and ultimately to financial goals. That's how we would like to do business in Mozambique. And on the other side, we have the role of tenders that have already been discussed, as well as bilateral agreements, but Mozambique specifically has had the successes in terms of issuing tenders, and they have been a very powerful tool in accelerating the renewables deployment in the country and increasing the competition and the interest of the private sector, ensuring that some risks are mitigated. There's the financing of the risk, land rights, environmental impact. So we as well see Mozambique as a country that, by benefiting with this, is been able to attract more interest of the private sector and ultimately have been able to lower energy tariffs in the country. The tenders that have already been mentioned, the ProAir, which is the first one, and last week was launched the GET program that we were also looking at. In the country that we have identified and working for was Cape Verde, with a country that is in a level of maturity, as Isabella mentioned, that is a bit higher in terms of the sector, though it's a smaller island, state with high needs in terms of renewables, in the place that we know well as well. So these are the two countries that we're happy to discuss, and just to close this intervention with the fun fact as well for the audience, not related to Lusófona countries, but I don't know if you know that the country that became the first African country to attract a foreign-led independent power producer to sell power to the network through a long-term power purchase agreement with the state utility was Côte d'Ivoire in 1994. So it set the standard for many other countries to follow through. And hope you guys enjoyed the various presentations, how they connect with each other, financiers, developers, and I hope we have an exciting Q&A for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. Thank you for this short overview of GreenVenture projects. Actually, I thought the first sub-Saharan IPP was in Cape Verde with Cabo Eólica. Maybe that's the first wind farm. Okay, it was one or the other, but thank you for that. So we already have some questions from the audience. Let me. So I would say overall, there is a question whether a non-profit organization can apply to EU funding. And there's also a question if there are projects in Pemba and Cabo Delgado in Mozambique. Then for Miguel from GreenVenture, there's a question if you're looking into investing in a brownfield or greenfield project. And there is a question, I would say, maybe Sebastian can answer this one. What is the challenge in working with commercial banks? The question is in Mozambique, but I think you can mention overall. So I just as a curiosity, I've made a quick Google search. What is the average interest rate? In Cape Verde is 1.25%, and that's why commercial banks are already lending directly to developers of IPP projects. In Mozambique is 16.5%, and in Angola 19.5%. Okay, so maybe Sebastian, you can start with the challenges of working with commercial banks, if you'd like to, and maybe if you wanna give a bit more details on the Edge financing initiative you will launch soon.
Yeah, happy to do that briefly. I think, well, there's several challenges. I wouldn't call it challenges working with local banks because again, the challenge lies in the understanding of on both sides, the project developers and the financiers. And what we have seen and observed is many domestic financiers are struggling to fully understand the asset class which we're talking about here. This is renewable energy. This is CNI. This is rooftop solar. This is so it's a, I would say, from a perspective of a traditional bank, it's a new business case. So they need to understand this, and they need to understand also what's in it for them, that this is a sector and a segment which makes sense to actually get involved in as a bank. So that's one thing. I mean, what we've learned in working with local banks in Mozambique, and I think this holds true for many other countries as well, is that there is an increasing interest by the local banks to get involved in the sector. At the same time, they need to understand that there's a business case for them because local banks also have other opportunities. They can invest in government bonds and others, so they need to see why they should do this. So this is something which we're doing in our upcoming activities. First of all, we are preparing sort of ideal best case based on real cases, a business case. We say, okay, there is a business to be made. Yeah, I don't expect any of the financiers unlike sort of what we hear here in the panel, sort of which is funded by EU and taxpayers' money. For a truly commercial bank, I don't expect them to get involved in something just because of SDG, climate change, and so on. They are in for the business, and we need to explain them that there's business to be made in the green renewable energy sector. And depending on the country, there is always a segment. But for example, again, Mozambique, the C&I commercial industrial segment is a very interesting segment for local banks. So we are working with them, understanding the asset class, developing their internal processes, on how to do a proper due diligence on this, maybe even supporting them on setting up sort of a green finance desk. Yeah, so that's the one side. And this is the topic, because the question is, what's the problem with working with local banks? The problem is not working with local banks. The problem is finding the banks which have already received the education, the training to actually understand the project. And that's something we're working on. And I think that's the solution on one side. The other thing, just briefly mentioned here, we are also going to work with the financial sector on helping them accessing specific funding. And because that's the other side of the truth, yes, there is business cases, but there's also not every project viable. And in some cases, it makes sense to have a first loss or a guarantee or a blended finance available as a local bank, because they are in for the business. And we need to understand this, and we need to catch them at this position. And there's many ways of doing this. It's not a
Thank you.
full answer, but I think it explains a little bit the field we're active in.
Thank you. Thank you, Sebastian. And talking about the challenges, so after we've been through the challenges of working with commercial banks, maybe Alina, you can tell us about the issues that you face in the African continent and that you believe the EU should address as Team Europe to provide more funding for renewable energy projects.
Gladly. Some of the elements that we have observed are what's preventing or hampering investments in the African region in energy, for instance. It would be just, I mean, if the EU collectively could all focus on just strengthening the resilience of the regional actors in terms of its dependencies, we are seeing that those transversal issues of having dependency on access to energy or food dependency, it's so transversal to what we do. Some of the people were mentioning this in the chat as well, the water nexus as well. It's so important. It's so crucial for the DFIs to all look at their activities in terms of value addition, how to support the local capital markets, what we do in terms of job creation. We focus on what could we just how we can be additional in the local markets. I mentioned this already in my presentation, but it's crucial to think around the local currency financing solutions that some options are out there. We just need to work on making this more affordable and really think outside the box in innovative financing terms. The risking mechanisms, like what the EU is putting at the table on the EU guarantees side and the whole EFSD Plus package, those are going to be, this is a game changer for the DFIs, and these are great de-risking solutions that are being put at the table right now, because this is really giving, this is really securing the operations, and the DFIs are basically de-risking the projects where they wouldn't reach otherwise. So more de-risking solutions as well, and focus on of what is adding value locally. If we see the energy projects that we are seeing in Africa, and we think of future hydrogen investments, for instance, we probably need to make sense out of the business model and solve issues such as the transport of hydrogen, the storage of hydrogen, and securing the off-taking agreements of those projects, for instance. And I would like to pick up on the hydrogen specifically because someone mentioned this in the presentations. These are the typical aspects that we encounter when the DFIs are screening projects around the energy issues in the region, and affordability is quite also another one. But I'm happy to share more.
Thank you, Alina. There is a new question here. Maybe you would be happy to, or you can give some feedback regarding. It is crucial in Africa to guarantee the support of sovereign funds to reduce the risk of private funds and investments. Should they be guaranteed upfront or negotiated during the financing construction process? About risk mitigation and negotiating sovereign funds. Would you like to step in for this question, or does any of the other speakers would like to provide some feedback on this matter?
Isabel, I can take the question.
Perfect. Obrigada.
So I think no, I think it's basically what we've been saying on our presentation. So we need to find the adequate de-risking mechanism for each project. It's very difficult to say upfront what is the ideal solution depending on several sectors and so specific promoter, and but our role here as a development institution is to make the projects work and to leverage also the public sector fund. So if that's our goal, then the way we set up the guarantee mechanism depends very much on the project. But what we can say is that we have today a toolbox it's much more rich than it was 5 years ago or 3 years ago. So this is this de-risking and also not doing everything with financing, but also having additional blending with grants and also providing equity or quasi-equity solutions and guarantees that help us to find the right combination. So it's not a linear question of yes or no. It depends on the project and the specifics of what we are assessing. Also on the commercial banks, I wanted to give a point also on the IB sides. When many of the projects, when they don't have the size to receive the direct financing from the IB, we use the commercial banks in the ground as our financial intermediaries. And we have also good experiences of lending to the commercial banks, which then lend to the individual promoters, being this in the private sector normally. So it's also a way of complementing our offer, going beyond when we cannot reach directly a ticket because it's too small at the end of the day.
Thank you, João. So I would say it's a tailored approach, depending on the market, depending on the project. Miguel, maybe you can answer now to the question directed directly to GreenVenture. If in Mozambique you are looking into investing in a brownfield or greenfield project.
So addressing that, in our case, we tend to focus on early stage projects. So we invest, our positioning is early stage and greenfield. This is where we can add most value in terms of our technical capacity as a developer and as well afterwards working on the project financing. So our preference is to work on projects that are greenfield, early stage as well. We're taking most of the development risk along the route of the development of the process. That is our preferred approach, though we can consider on an ad hoc basis brownfield assets, but that is not the core of our focus in Mozambique and Africa.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that issue. And now, because we've already extended a bit the time of this webinar, but I'm happy to see there's a lot of interest in the discussion, as expected. But I would wrap up with a final question to all the speakers. There's a question here. We have a 40 megawatt project and we would like to understand the funding requirements from the presenter. So this is the typical question. So what are the requirements and what is the process to start a request for funding? For some, it's direct, I would say. For others, you should go through several steps. So I will do a run through all the speakers and ask you to give concrete guidelines or instructions to the participants on how they can request, how they can start the process for requesting financing, and always highlighting that the projects need to be bankable. So you need to have a certain types of studies and feasibility studies in order for these institutions to consider providing finance. And then extra, just because that question wasn't answered, if you have any type of support foreseen for the nonprofit sector. So maybe we go through the same order. Alina, would you like to start?
Definitely. I would say there were a few one-stop shops that were already mentioned here. There is this debate around yes, just how to canalize all the information. In my case, the EDFI Association has an overview of what the DFIs are investing on, what are their mandates, their priorities of investment in the area. So I can always refer you with the right DFI, if I may say so, if you present me a project. But what you just mentioned, Isabel, is crucial. There's always a need to receive concrete investment needs, to have a feasible, bankable project, and with feasibility studies that are backing up the proposal. Usually, we also can share with you a fiche of the information that the DFIs would typically require to screen projects before you enter into direct contact with a local DFI office in the countries that you're working. So these are some more or less the type of referrals that we can help you with, and to identify you the relevant DFI in your cases, in your specific case. So I'll leave my contact on the chat, and I'm happy to follow up.
Thank you, Alina, especially for your availability. João.
It's quite similar. So once we have a bankable project and in line with the IB eligibility, we have our offices in the several countries that can receive the investment proposal. Also glad to redirect anything that well, you can send to the Lisbon office, that we are in contact with our colleagues in Luxembourg and on the several countries. So it's more important to find the right project than the right contact. So it's easy to, once we have the project, to redirect it internally in the IP.
Thank you. So as we usually say in this type of events, it's not a question of having money available. It's a question of finding the right projects. Sebastian, would you like to add something? As a one-stop shop, you are the most obvious path to screen how the project can receive financing.
Yeah, maybe, I mentioned it. I tried to post the link here again in the chat, but somehow the chat doesn't work anymore, but it has been posted further up in the chat, so you'll find it there. Otherwise, you find us in the internet, GET.invest.eu. And there's also an apply here button. And a 40 megawatt project, which was asked here, this is exactly sort of the kind of projects which we support. However, if your project is ready, if you have all documents available, if you are really, I would say, bankable, you can, of course, also approach financiers directly. You can check our funding database. If you come back, or they come back to you and say, okay, we are missing a little bit of here, we are missing a little bit of a better preparation, then we are there to support you with the GET.invest Finance Access Advisory as the one-stop shop. You just need to apply, and we will support you free of charge, and then obviously hand over to the financiers here in the room, whichever is most fitting. Last comment here, also, if you're already in touch with the financier, with the local bank, You can also stay with this financier. It's not that we're going to send you elsewhere. We're happy to support your project, even if you have your finance already lined up and just need to cross another hurdle.
Thank you, Sebastian. Corentin, there's also, I'll just put in an extra question that if Electrify is willing or looking into opening an office in Angola.
It's a good question. We would love to. That being said, so the intermediary response would be we tend to work with the EU delegations in the countries. So that could be also a nice counterpoint for us. Technically speaking, we could look at the investment opportunities in Angola. So if you believe that you would fit with some of the investment criteria that we mentioned, feel free also to contact us. You will receive the presentation afterwards, I believe, with my contact details. You can also look for more information on some of our projects on our website, which is electrify.eu, and we'll share that on the chat as well. So yes, looking forward to receiving some investment proposals if you believe you have the right project for us.
Thank you. I would be happy to see many emails going to your inboxes after this webinar. And so to wrap up the webinar, I would like to invite Edgar Riera from GreenVenture. And once again, I would like to thank GreenVenture for choosing ALER to highlight their activities and to bring to the participants of this very relevant topic. And I take the opportunity to invite other companies to join us and get in touch so we can also organize a spotlight, a specific spotlight tailored to your needs and interests. So Edgar, please.
Thank you very much, Isabel. So just to complete, thank you to ALER to the organization of this webinar. That was quite a success and that exceeded, of course, our expectations. Thank you to all the speakers that have been quite detailed and enthusiastic in participating in this webinar and with very helpful and clear presentations. And thank you to all the participants to being available and to participate on this conversation, with which we would like also, if there will be any other questions, any questions where we can help, or any projects where any of those participants see on our side a partner that can help to enable those projects, please feel free to contact ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edgar, and I hope you also get even more partners and companies willing to invest together with you in renewable energy projects in Portuguese-speaking countries, but also elsewhere. So once again, thank you all for staying here with us. We had almost 100 participants for this webinar, which is definitely a success. Of course, the speakers also, the topic and the speakers also contributed or contributed the most for this. So thank you all for accepting the invitation to join this discussion. And if you would like to have more information about these markets, about the policy frameworks, about the project and the opportunities, feel free to get in touch with ALER to become our member, and you will have access to inside information and to all the developments of these markets. Thank you once again. Have a very nice day. And tomorrow it's the World Environment Day. And so I hope to see you again soon. Bye.